Chief Justice in the state court since 1991, when she was appointed to the Fulton County Juvenile Court. She also has her own law firm, and her show is Emmy nominated in its 23rd season. I'd like to introduce you to Judge Hatchett.
Back on. I was like, what am I going to do? Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. And Andrea, people have been thanking me all afternoon for being here. But let me just say to you, it is my privilege to be in this space this afternoon as we celebrate such a remarkable man who gave us so much, and too few people know his story. And so for us to gather here in this space tonight, this afternoon, is nothing short of magnificent. And I'm so glad that all of you are here, and I hope that as you leave, that you will share the good news. We know that we hear so much bad news, that it is important that we share and tell the good story. And so I used to try to pass for young. I can no longer do that. And so I have these in every color. I just couldn't find my purple ones quickly. There are 3 pair for $9.99. Not ashamed as well. Ashamed of that game. And so I have to put them on so that I can share with you. Let me just, I have to tell you that God works in wonderful ways, and you're going to hear more about how I now know Tim West and how I got here this afternoon, and I introduce him in more detail a little bit later. But I do want to talk some about the Institute, the LGBTQ Institute that is led by Tim, and what is happening, because we are talking about an institute that really is cultivating the next generation of people who must be in leadership advocacy roles in this community. And that's nothing to just discount. That we've got to understand that it's not only must people who believe in the rights of all people be standing shoulder to shoulder, but we must be cultivating and raising up a new generation of young people who get it. Because too much of our history, of our struggle, of how we are here, has been lost. And so, Tim, I am grateful for the work that you do there. They're engaging in some very dynamic and diverse leaders and bringing them on and committed to weaving organizations together. Because one of the things that we have got to learn, people, is that we cannot do this work in isolation. That we have got to be clear that no longer can we be in silos. This work is too important, and too much is at stake for us to go and figure that we can do it on our own. And so we've got to take the best from everyone. And we have got to come. I know I'm probably longer than I'm supposed to, but I got to say this. We have got to come, and I'm passionate about this, we have got to come to a common table. We have got to understand that we are all vested in this work. All vested in this work. And I would tell you that I see it as a magnificent tapestry. Craig, that's how I see this work. As a magnificent tapestry where you bring your piece, and you bring your piece, and I got to show up with my piece, and we ought to come together collectively at this community table where we put the best we've got on the table. I am so sick
of folks saying, but you know, Judge, we've always done it this way. Well, if that was working, we'd be in better shape than that.
Oh yeah, I'm going there.
We would be in better shape than we are right now. And so, but Judge, we always did it like this because, you know, Aunt Bessie started this program. Well, she may have started it, and we need to just put a portrait of Aunt Bessie on the wall. You know, give her a praise. You know, not lose a sense of our history because she's an important piece of that. But we ought to be bold enough to step beyond what's comfortable. Figure out how we join hands, how we stand shoulder to shoulder, and make a difference. Because we won't get another chance to get it right while we are on this journey. And so I am grateful to be in this room this afternoon. I really am grateful. All right, this is not on my script. Yeah, but that was on my heart. So that's okay. And for this institute, when Tim has really committed his life's work, we're really talking about how we are committed to the human dignity by connecting LGBTQ plus history to our present acts. And then understand our history so that we understand the basis, the foundation from which this work must be built and expanded and continued. And so for that, Tim, we are grateful for the work of the Institute. And so I want us to also be very clear that we stay focused on the Institute, the LGBTQ plus Institute work, and to figure out how your piece might connect with that piece that might connect with other pieces. Not to oversimplify it, and I promise you I'm almost through. Not to oversimplify it. I want you to think about it as children's Legos. I'm going to take your piece, and we're going to take your piece, and we're just going to keep finding pieces until we then build a foundation that is unshakable. Got that? That is so fierce and so strong that there is no other possibility but for everything that is launched from that foundation to soar and thrive and go on and be enormously. And so, now I'm not going to invite you back again because I am too long-winded. No. But you know, if you're black and backwards, I just know. I said that one time, my old pastor, I didn't know he was in the room, I said that one time, I said, we don't even pass the offering plate to 2 o'clock, and that's before the sermon. It was a joke, but not too much of a joke. But anyway, he was in the audience. I thought, oh, well. Let me get on to the bio. This is a very brief bio. This man has been on the battlefront, and this is just a glimpse of who Craig Washington is. And you know it. I mean, he's an icon in this community. And obviously we claim him now, even though he was born in Brooklyn. And we're going to acknowledge that. But he belongs to us now. And he has been carrying the torch, the Rustin torch. Didn't just figure it out today. He has been carrying that torch, but not only carrying that torch, but keeping it ablaze. He was born and raised by his parents, Anna and Leon Washington, Quincy, as I said. He co-founded the Bayard Rustin under Lord Breakfast in Atlanta. He is a writer who has written extensively. When I say extensively, that is really an understatement. On essential matters for The Advocate, Atlanta Magazine, TheBody.com, Georgia Voice, Huffington Post, and various anthologies. He created and led several initiatives for black gay men, such as Second Son, And go ahead now. It's all right. And the Deeper Love Project. Craig is also a licensed social worker and provides individual and group therapy, for which we should all be very grateful to you, Craig, for this enormous body of work. And so he, in turn, will introduce our panel for what is going to be a very provocative conversation this afternoon. Craig, if you would join us.
All right. Wow. I got introduced by Judge Hatchett.
That's right.
So sit down. And, first, I want to say what first comes to mind, and that is the view from here. We are so grateful for your presence here today. We really are. I want to personally thank Tim West and the LGBTQ Institute and the partners, Community Movement and Solutions Not Punishment for making this historic moment happen. And I also wanted to thank and remember and acknowledge all the folks, some who are still living and some have passed, that worked over the years before the Rustin film was made, to make sure that Rustin is remembered. Can we show some love and appreciation?
Yeah.
Today, right? Like Darlene Hudson and Maurice Cook and others. I want to invite you to look at this panel, this discussion, as not only an exploration of Rustin's life and work, and just having that rich dialogue, but also an acknowledgement of the work and the lives of today's angelic troublemakers. All right? Keep that in mind. So I'm going to bring up our illustrious panel. All right? So I'm going to start with Tony Michelle. Tony Michelle is the Executive Director of Solutions Not Punishment Collective.
That's all that matters.
So that translation. Okay. Next panelist is Marcus Lee. Postdoctoral fellow in LGBT studies and a lecturer in the Department of African American Studies at Princeton University. Evan Marlborough, come on up, Evan. Evan is the founder of the Georgia Youth Poll Worker Project and Speak Truth to Power Youth Advisory Board member at the Robert Kennedy Human Rights Organization. And our fourth panelist is Carlton McCall. Carlton is the president of the Bayard Rustin LGBTQ+ Rally, as in Raleigh, North Carolina, Raleigh A. Philip Randolph Institute chapter. So this is who we have. And I am so excited to be just joined by this young black brilliance. I want to thank you for the work that you do. For, as John Lewis might say, Congressman John Lewis might say, start that good trouble. That good trouble you start. All right, so we're going to get started. So, first question, this is for the panel. Please share how you first learned about Bayard, your first impression, and how you might see your work relates to his work and his vision.
Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Sunday. always an honor and blessing to be amongst beautiful Black and brown folks and folks who love us and protect us. So I'm really excited to be here today. I was first introduced to Bayard Rustin during, I was a sophomore in college. I attended and graduated from Norfolk State University at HBCU in Virginia. And unfortunately on campus, we didn't talk much about queer icons in the movement. But through the National Black Justice Coalition and the work of the Human Rights Campaign and their effort to bring emerging LGBTQ leaders together during the time during Obama's administration in 2012, 2011. Their first event at the White House was called Owning Your Power. And that was the first time that I was introduced to this iconic Black gay man who had done so much work for our movement. And in that space, I also was introduced to other Black LGBTQ folks. Specifically for me as a Black trans woman who stood out to me at those events were folks like Valerie Spencer, an iconic Black trans woman, organizer and therapist out in California, where she called me to be more of myself. I was a young, non-binary, queer person, and she was like, "Girl, there's a woman inside." And if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't really know how to own my power. I wouldn't know what that meant. I wouldn't know who started that mantra for so many of us today. And I've been committed to that work since. As you mentioned, I'm executive director and one of the co-founders of the Solutions Not Punishment Collaborative, a Black, transgender, and queer-led organization here in Atlanta, focused on keeping everybody safe, even when everybody's not focused on keeping Black trans folks safe. And we do that through embodied leadership practices, and through an amazing program called our Freedom School. We really build the leadership of organizers and emerging leaders across the city of Atlanta, and through a mutual aid fund, where we're able to bail out folks and give them supportive housing so that they can show up to our work and participate in what we are calling, good trouble, and to support them in understanding what that means and what their roles are inside of that movement, inside of that process. And so that's how I was introduced to Bayard Rustin and to so many of y'all today.
Thank you for this question, Craig. And thank you all for coming. This is really an honor to be here and to see Tony and Craig, who I've known for a long time, probably through Rustin. And so I'll sort of start with that by saying that I learned about Rustin when I was a sophomore at Morehouse. Curious sophomore. I was walking in downtown Atlanta, and I saw that there was a program at the Auburn Avenue Research Library that actually Craig was putting on. And it was the documentary Brother Outsider. And so I learned about Rustin through Craig. My first impression of him was that he was such this powerful man who sort of opened new questions for me about what freedom actually meant, what it meant to be free personally, but also what it meant to be free politically. So I took to calling him a sort of ancestral grandfather in some ways. And so what was really powerful for me was just sort of the community of Rustinites that is formed, in sort of remembering him and also spreading awareness about who he is.
Thank you for that question as well. I would say I was also a sophomore. So I was a sophomore at Georgia State. Right. Sophomore at Georgia State. I had the opportunity to sit down and have lunch with Dr. King's attorney, Clarence Jones. So Dr. Jones, what he did in that conversation, I was still very new in my career as a voting rights organizer and working with young people. So through that conversation, I just got a list of all people I should look up afterwards because he was dropping so much knowledge, and Bayard Rustin was a part of that. Right? He was actually one of the first people who told me, he was like, well, Martin Luther King, he spoke at it, right? And he was a principal planner, but if you actually want to look at the in-depth of going into the March on Washington and the mechanics of it, and the ideas for it, right? You gotta look at A. Philip Randolph, and you also gotta look at Bayard Rustin. So I think, he kind of set me on that path, and we that knowledge, and I've been able to learn more as I study more of the movement and movement spaces.
What I learned about Bayard Rustin was back in 2020 when I was a filmmaker for the A. Randolph Institute. I am now a organizer for the A. Randolph Institute for North Carolina. And back in 2022, I was voluntold by my executive director to become the president of the Bayard Rustin LGBTQ chapter that we have building in North Carolina. At first, I didn't know nothing about who Bayard Rustin was and what he stood for until I actually got in depth of becoming the president of this chapter. And then also in 2022, I was able to witness history in the making when the charges of, against Bayard Rustin in Orange County, North Carolina was exonerated after 75 years of, so I was actually in the courtroom, and I actually was able to witness them, dismiss those charges against him.
And also shortcomings. I think that puts more pressure on us to reflect on what we are doing today. When I think about Rustin, I think about things like the March on Washington, but I also think about his Zionism, and I think about the destruction in Gaza today, and how important it is for us to reflect on that. When I think about Rustin, I think about his nonviolence, but I also think about his unwillingness or reluctance to include Black women as speakers at the March on Washington. I think that shortcoming forces us to think about things like reproductive justice in Georgia today, right? And so I think it's really important to reflect on not just what is remembered, but what is forgotten through memory, right? Every act of remembering something is an act of forgetting. So as we look at the film, as we sit here today, I think we always have to think about not just the power of this iconography, but also the power of what is left out, and ask ourselves why we want to leave those things out over and again.
This is for anyone on the panel. In recent years, over the past decade, Rustin his national recognition has been expanded. There's the Medal of Freedom that was posthumously awarded by President Obama. And of course, the Oscar-nominated film, in 2023, Rustin. I wanted to talk about and share the work of the grassroots organizers and educators and what they've done, just an example of what they've done to ensure that Rustin is appreciated and remembered. In terms of what you know about that.
Yeah, so here in Atlanta, each year, in honor and celebration of Martin Luther King Day celebrations, the Lord Rustin Breakfast is hosted every Lord Rustin. It happens every year, and I think that it is a testament to really our elders holding it down and making sure that there is intentional space for communities, for young people to gather, to practice being in community together, and to learn about what folks are up to. I always get a kick out of seeing folks and sharing space with folks, eating some good bacon, and eggs, because at every place the food's not good. But the breakfast is always good. I point at you because you hosted it, and we thank you. But those are just some ways in which I know that here in Atlanta, folks are committed to bringing Rustin and Audrey Lorde to life in all the ways.
I'll say something about this. Also, when the film came out, I took to telling people that Bayard Rustin is not an overnight celebrity, in the sense that he did not go from being completely unknown to becoming a celebrity in 2023. Instead, actually, for decades, people have been preserving his memory through really mundane practices, like oral histories of him at the end of his life in the late 80s that then become these really important historical documents for people. Simple things like a Bayard Rustin rally in 1995, which maybe included 20 people in Atlanta just coming together and saying that this man is important. I think that those sorts of practices, naming those sorts of practices is important because it sort of alerts us to the extent to which just ordinary things are critical for preserving history. Asking people questions, writing things down, even if it feels like nothing, it actually becomes something that's really important. So I'm so grateful that in 1986, a year before Bayard Rustin died, a group of people just sat him down and asked him questions about his life, because then that made it possible for me to know anything or to know the things about him that I'd like to know today. And so I just think that that example is really critical.
Thank you. Just want to add that group, that collective, that was other countries of Black gay men writing and performing collective. Look it up. Know it. That's your history. That's Black history. That's Black queer history. And they made sure, one of the first to make sure that Rustin would be historicized. And as far as thank you for sharing the Rustin Library. Darlene Hudson and I co-founded that over 20 years ago to ensure that Atlanta folks, particularly Black queer community and our allies, will be informed about Rustin and have a place to break bread for the march. Very, very important event and our lives. So this next question is for Carlton and Tony. All right. So, okay, so Rustin was the organizer of the most memorable and well-attended peaceful protest to date, the March on Washington in 1968. What do you think he brought to his role as a leader that made him so successful? I mean, it's overall, not necessarily just the march. That's sort of a shining example of his power.
I would honestly say that he brought bravery. He brought resilience. Being that, he was a man of color, but also an openly gay man, a gay activist in his, across the nation. I think that he was not scared to do what it was taking to, make it happen. And that's one of the reasons why I love doing the work that I do today, because as a openly gay man myself, you cannot be afraid of what the world's going to think of you. You have to continue to keep fighting and moving forward in everything that you do. It doesn't matter if you're just going to walk down the street to the store. Hold your head up high. That's what Bayard Rustin did. People doubted a lot of things that he thought that he was going to do or did do. They tried to shadow him, but he did not allow them to stop him to, organize one of the biggest movements in nation's history. So I think bravery and resilience was the number one, and honesty, being honest with yourself. If you're honest with yourself, you'll be honest with others. So that's one of the things I will say that he did bring to the forefront when it came down to the work that he has done.
So one of my favorite books to share with young people and to share with other organizers is a book called The Playbooks for Progressives by Eric Mann. Anyone out there know that book? It's a phenomenal, there you go. It's a phenomenal book where it really outlines the qualities of an effective leader, an effective organizer. Not only does it outline these qualities, it also gives you a set of roles. It's just a description of roles. And sometimes it's like you just need somebody to kind of tell you that you fit in, and this is where you fit in, so that you kind of get in line, You may even have some good things to offer, but you might not know how it fits within certain groups. And so one of the roles that stick out to me and reminds me of Bayard so much is the role of the evangelist, okay? A person who is required and whose role is to recruit and retain folks and tap into people's deepest feelings and into their biggest aspirations about life. And we see Rustin embodying that throughout the film. We see it at the beginning when he's telling Martin, why you ain't here? And then we also see it with the young people, right, throughout the movie, throughout the film. But in return, we also see his friends holding him to the same standard, right? Calling him to the fire, calling him to his role, to stay inspired, to remember who he is, right? And we see that, I saw it definitely with Ella Baker and a few other folks. And so just the role of the evangelist, again, it requires so much accountability. It requires spirit work. It requires the hard, grungy work and the organizing work to recruit and retain folks. But I love it because it's that spirit work that we don't talk about much in movement work. You know, spirit work is required, that our hearts are sound, that our minds are sound in order to lead our movements. And to know that he embodied that, it makes me one of those like Rustics. I love a person who can be accountable and be like, this is where I'm wrong and this is where I'm going, help me. Baby, that's hard for many people. And it's hard for individuals, and it's hard for a collective, right? A body of people to move together. And to witness him do that well, just is always inspiring to me.
Thank you both. This is for you. This next question actually is for Evan and Marcus. So, and this was depicted certainly very starkly in the Rustin film. Congressman from Harlem, Alan played Powell. And Senator Strom Thurmond, polar opposites, at least politically or culturally in other ways. They found common ground in their deployment, their use of homophobia to sabotage justice. What does this example indicate to you? What might it indicate about Rustin's power and this threat, or the threat that he posed?
And also thank you for that question. When I read it, I think we talked about it a few days ago. I read it, I was like, oh, wow, that's a good question. That's a very tough one. I would say, and it has a lot of implications for back then and for today, right? When we talk about building movements, we have to build movements that are a coalition of different marginalized communities coming together, and that's what a lot of people in power fear, right? So when you talk about Strom Thurmond, when you talk about Powell, they still are on opposite sides. They still served a system that wasn't ready for the change that Rustin was making, right? And I think that using homophobia, is something that has been used to divide us a lot. I think there's been a lot of, especially me growing up as a cis black man, there has been a lot of propaganda. There has been a lot of misinformation. There has been a lot of browbeating about the separation of black liberation, queer liberation, right? And using that, but you have to come to realize, I think, what Rustin was fighting for, what a lot of people in the LGBTQ community were fighting for, was the fact that, our liberations aren't mutually exclusive, right? In order for us to truly be liberated, we have to be liberated together, right? When you see these communities come together, that's when you see other allies coming against us, right? And that's when you see, I love advocating for Clayton Powell, right? I love all the things he did in the Civil Rights Act, but I also need to recognize the fact that he was a figure that perpetuated a lot of problematic behavior, right? And it's up to me, especially in future generations, to understand, see it in full context, and also say that, we can take what is good, but we also need to push forward. Now, Strom Thurmond, we can leave in the past. But I do think that, what it shows today and what it shows back then is, when communities come together, when there's understanding, when there's inclusion, oftentimes the forces that we would never thought of will come against us. I'm sorry for the words out.
No, I agree with everything you just said, and the other thing that I think this example shows me is really the fragility of some coalitions. I always think to myself, if homophobia is the thing that tears you apart, you weren't strong in the first place, right? That there's something else that was already missing, right? And so I think that what's been powerful in a really ironic way was how powerfully divisive homophobia could have been to a movement that closing fractures. So I think that then what that example forces us to do is to reflect on our own strength and to really realize that strength in a important way. You know, I often think that homophobia is mistaken as a display of strength. It's actually a display of deep weakness. And I think that what Bayard Rustin reveals then was that weakness in the civil rights movement and also among conservatives.
Carlton, this is for you. In the film, it's a depiction, and it's an interaction between Rustin and a character that is not based on a living person. So, Elias Taylor, the pastor who is closeted, and Rustin has a romantic relationship. And there's a scene where Rustin and Elias are in a bar, and Rustin poses the question, how can you preach salvation and not want to save yourself? How can you speak of love when your heart is disconnected from your flesh? How is Rustin's queerness essential to our understanding and our appreciation of him as a figure of social change? Why is it that the queerness of that identity important for us to acknowledge?
I could say it's essential. It's essential because despite everything that was going on around everybody being closeted, he was never, he was free with himself. He never wanted to shadow himself, despite what he has been through. Even as a young boy, he came out and he was free about who he was. Against all odds around him, he never stopped being him. So that is number one essential to us today, because as you see, a lot of us are living our truth the same way that Rustin lived his truth. And we should continue to teach our generations coming up to continue to live your truth, because like I said, if you're true to yourself, you're true to others. And you'll be able to build that strong foundation that you truly, really want, openly and freely. So it's truly essential with the work that we're doing today, because we definitely have to speak up and speak out. Speaking up and speaking out is very strong in the LGBTQ community these days. You gotta speak up and speak out. You can't be closeted no more. You can't hide who we are anymore. As long as we continue to hide, you will not be able to, fulfill the success and the leadership that you really want around you. So I can honestly say, yeah, stay true to yourself. And that's what he did.
Thank you. I think our sister outsider, our sister Audrey Lloyd teaches us your silence will not protect you. Your silence will not protect you. This is what it's during the same scene where Elias talks about going to a black boy, and he was taught that because they think that you're less than, you got to be better than. And Rustin's response, he talks about the suffocating chains of Negro respectability. And then after that, he talks about coming out to Rustin, how he preferred dancing with boys. What does the Rustin film and what you know of Rustin, period, show us about the connection between black respectability? We don't know how what respectability is there, right? The connection between black respectability and black heteronormativity. The insistence that we perform and show as homosexual, and the imposition of that. Black respectability, black heteronormativity.
I would say, chasing a respectfully political dream will never get us anything, right? When you talk about respectability and talk about it, and I think in that time, I think it was always a dichotomy between, the respectability that black people need versus what they were perceived as, right? We talk about we're respectable in spite of all of the negative stereotypes that white people had of us, or all the things that were used to justify, our enslavement, all the things that were used to justify our discrimination, and all the things that were used to justify, a lot of the imperialist tactics that have affected even our homelands, right? So I think that respectability is, a very big chain on all of us, as Rustin talked about, because it forces us to fit into boxes that our oppressors like to see us in, or where our oppressors can talk to, and it lets them dictate the terms of how we're supposed to fight for our liberation from our oppressors. So I think that's where I get it from, and I think, of course, I can't speak to a perspective as a queer person about how it affects, but I can speak to the fact that oftentimes the policing of our behavior, the policing of our pain, the policing of our mental health, oftentimes lead us to being a part of a movement that doesn't get us all the way to where we need to be, right? Because, you always get to that wall, right? You sat peacefully, you got spat on, you got this part, but, we still need more. Well, wait on that, right? Or, you sat in these rallies that were peaceful, you went to church, right? You went to church, you're a good Christian, you dress well, and you get a little bit further, but, we're still not as far yet, right? But then you've done all these things, right? And you've done all and played into the respectability politics of it all. And you say, well, we're still not where we need to be. And now you start getting things that aren't respectable. Now it's like, well, what happened to all the respectability before, right? How you guys are so nice and peaceful and respectable, then why aren't you the same now? Well, because our needs went bad, right? And, when we talk about the point of the movements, it's not to look good, it's to address historic needs, and I think that's where it stops.
Yeah, I think that was really. I would just add, I'm a teacher, so I always think about things like this. So, in this way, I should say, by respectability politics, we're talking about this sort of strategy that some Black political actors take on, whereby they prove that they are deserving of freedom by showing some form of quote-unquote self-respect. Right? The problem with respectability, as Evan just laid out, is that if someone else doesn't think you are deserving of freedom, there's never enough proof that you can get that person to show that you actually are. Right? So it ultimately is always a trap. The problem for me with respectability that I would add is that the eye is always facing outward. Right? That Black political groups, Black people generally, always have to think about themselves through the eyes of the other. What will this person think of me if I do this? Right? What will others think of me if this group does this? Right? The problem with that, I think, is that we just undercut our own power. We're never looking at ourselves and figuring out what we want if we are always judging ourselves by someone else's ruler. And so I think that what Rustin's example then demonstrates is this iconic example of a person who defies respectability in some ways and really lives his own life by his own ruler. We can kind of, I think, draw inspiration from that to recognize everything that Evan just said, and just to know that, again, there's never enough proof that you can give someone to show that you deserve freedom.
Just to piggyback off of what you just said, in the film Rustin with Alice, I can honestly say that was a form of people pleasing. We can't continue to people please. You have to respect yourself first. And people pleasing, you're going to always be put in that box because you want to make sure that everyone around you is, fulfilled or feel good about themselves or what you want them, pretty much their perspective of what they want for you. No, what do you want for yourself? He phrases, for example, in the movie, like you say, he was so worried about what the church is going to feel about him or how he was portrayed in the community, but deep inside, he was not happy with himself because he was not out free. So that's people pleasing. We gotta stop the the effects of people pleasing, and if you're not pleasing yourself first.
I think some of the best wins and some of the best things created, some of the best moments that have been like cultivated within Black culture and queer culture has been things that have been thought about and held by people who think and exist beyond the binary. And until that is honored, right? You talked a lot about, not being able to prove things to folks. And as a trans woman, that's that trans 101 that I just don't do no more. 15 years in the game, having to prove to people and explain to people about who I am, who my people are, and why we deserve life, why trans women deserve to not be killed and gunned down, why trans men deserve to not be violated and also gunned down, even at home within their families. There aren't enough conversations or enough time to do that, because there's something about people who exist outside of the binary, who've already found that peace, and who already understands that kind of hope, and who already embodies that kind of faith and that amount of faith. And Black people at the core exist beyond the binary. And until that is understood and honored, I don't think that, we would really get to that true vision, because everyone has a role, right? And a lot of our roles as organizers and our roles as members and leaders of the Solutions Not Punishment Collaborative is to support people in reimagining a world without violence, to reimagine a world where more Black trans women and trans folks are leading and alive and well, and where all of us reimagine a city where all of us are free from over-policing, right? And just being able to be our free, in our authentic selves, where sex workers can thrive and boop-de-boop-bop, where and how they get to boop-de-boop-bop, so that we can live freely and whole and well and thrive and not struggle. And so there's work to be done about how we practice reimagining ourselves. And I hope and I pray and I have faith that Black folks will know that we have that source in us, so that we continue to keep each other safe, because that's what we've been up to for centuries. And definitely, I think that that's definitely something that Rustin embodies, right? The art of protecting each other, even if it means hiding. I also just want to say this quickly, just around respectability and being respectful, right? I'm a pretty respectful person. I'm very nice. Because I have to, like a police or something, if I have to go down. But I'll even think about this morning and like my choice of outfit. When I was walking up, you said it's giving what part?
Hip hop realness.
Hip hop realness. That's what she was going for. I was like, should I be respectable because Judge Hatchett was here?
Well, if I had known, I would have worn my black leather pants. Next time we're together, I'm not gonna come all suited up. No.
Listen. And so it's the art of just being your authentic self as much as you can, and knowing how to get there as quick as you can, so that you can show up to your people and slay the day.
I love this. I love it. But the runaround building. This is for anyone. Rustin, right? Rustin greatly needed a partner right now. To what extent, and if so, how how is it relevant, that aspect of his life? How is that relevant to how he's remembered? That's the thought.
That is relative to how he's remembered because back then it was a crime to be someone homosexual and also integrated. So therefore, I feel like that was a moment of him living his truth and saying, hey, I'm gonna make my lifestyle a movement. Despite how everybody else feel about, oh, you're not supposed to be sitting beside this white man, or you're not supposed to be shacking up, with another man, I'm gonna do what I want to do. No matter what people say, it's just my choice of preference. This is what I'm going to do. But also, it taught that it's time for us to be integrated, and especially in his time, it was against the law. So might as well, and we're gonna get in trouble for what I'm just gonna do. So I think that showed, and that's why I said that's where the bravery comes in at, because despite everything that was going on around him, he still continued to do what he wanted to do. So I will say that, yeah, he was trying to make the movement of integration and homosexuality a norm, especially in the levels that he was in.
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, one of the ways I think about this is in terms of the film. So if you haven't seen the film, you should, but the film includes a fictionalized storyline with Bayard Rustin, who's dating a closeted pastor who is black in the film. So to answer your question more directly, Craig, honestly, I think I saw that storyline in the film and thought, is this the best we can do in terms of representations of black gay men and sexuality in black communities? Is the best we can come up with if we're thinking with our wildest imagination an account of a pastor who's closeted and is sleeping with crowds. Right? I thought that was honestly the most happening thing that they could come up with. And so if we're really concerned with thinking about the color of his sexuality, let's say, I think that then we have to really reflect on, again, our own imaginings about what that could have looked like. If it doesn't look like what we want it to look like in terms of the written record, what stories do we want to know about him? And again, what does that say about who we are?
Thank you. Do we have time for, we're out of time. One more question or closing remarks? How's that? Okay. Yeah, so I want to leave you because, well, first of all, thank you all for participating. There are points in which I'm tearing up, and I give myself permission to cry as well. I'm cool. I'm good. Any last insights or reflections that you want to share, that you want to leave with those as it relates to that which we've been discussing? Any one point that you want to make?
Let us all continue to be angelic troublemakers that we are born to be. That's all I gotta say. That's it. That's all. Drop the mic.
I think I would just say, remembering Bayard Rustin is important, but his memory, remembering him, will be a thing that we do in vain if you don't know the name of next bit of it, or if you don't know the names of the labor organizers in your local community, or if you don't know the sort of most recent legislation on reproductive freedom that is affecting people across our United States. Okay? So we can remember him, but we have so much work to do in his way.
I would like to just call people up to build a body that holds grace for yourself that also holds patience and kindness, and that has the power to interrupt violence for yourself, to understand what's happening, when it's happening, why it's happening for yourself, because it is so important that you're present with yourself enough, because there are Black trans people and young people who are dying and being gunned down in this city each day. And we need you, and we need ourselves to be practiced with those skills and with those characteristics so that we can live a whole, full life. So that there are people that know that there are other people that love us and that need us and that depend on us and that support us and will show up for us and who give space for us to lead. And I don't think that we are those embodied people yet, but I have faith that we will get there. But I do call on all of you to build a body that holds those things. And it don't have to be well. You just gotta know what it looked like and feel like one time, so that when you breathe, you won't let it happen again to yourself. And that when you take another breath, you won't let it happen to somewhere else. To someone else. And so we are practicing that again at the Solutions Not Punishment Collaborative. Again, a Black trans-led organization who is committed to doing that work, and we need you to join us, and we need you to support us, because we need to have a city full of folks. When they build a cop city, we have to be ready to build something else, right? And so I'm just calling y'all to do that work and to be in that work in the meantime. Thank y'all so much.
Can you hear me? Evan, I with all of my heart, I ask you to take this opportunity. You bring so much to this space, so.
Well, first of all, I think
you do.
First of all, I want to say I want to show appreciation for even being allowed in this space, right? You know, to be platformed is a blessing in itself, and a privilege within itself. So I want to thank all of you guys for allowing me to be here and allowing me to speak, right? And I say that with humility as well. You know, I definitely understand that, and have learned, especially in growing up as an activist and being in these communities, that, you know, everybody has work to do, including myself, right? Like, I can sit on a panel like this, I can sit on 100 panels and not be perfect, right? And I think there's a lot of activists that are, you know, cis Black men like myself, who can very much say and do the same thing, right? So I just, you know, really appreciate it. I feel like I've learned from each and every one of you. I just met you guys, so, you know, thank you guys, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm full. I'm full. As a 64-year-old Black gay man who has lived a lot of my adult life in terms of doing this work, the importance of intergenerational work is so key. Whatever you're doing, think about it in terms of that as a value, as a necessity.
Are we gonna queue up?
Wednesday, April 17th, 2024, at the Eastern. May 17, 1954, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in Brown versus Board of Education that separating public school students by race was unconstitutional. 70 years later, the National Center for Civil and Human Rights honors Brown versus Board of Education's legacy with an inspiring stage show, music, dance, and storytelling. Join our Power to Inspire experience to see the performance and celebrate the center's 10th anniversary, inspiring the change maker in each of us. Tickets on sale now. Visit civilandhumanrights.org/courage.
You got all that?
Yes.
Take notes? All right. 70 years since we've had the Brown versus Board of Education decision. And so now I am to raffle. I'm assuming, Tim, that I'm going to give away two, not just one, 2 tickets so that you can attend that amazing experience on April 17th. So I need you to get out your red tickets, please. Red tickets. All right, and I need to go get my pink glasses. All right, you ready with your red tickets? All right, you gotta get your red tickets right now. I'm just gonna do probably the last 4 numbers. The first numbers are all the same, right? 3719. Come on now. Alright, so if you, and tell us who you are.
I'm here.
Okay. And you know that you got these tickets, right? And you're gonna wear those glasses that night? I love the glasses. I love that. All right, I'm making some other kind of glasses. All right, so you are to take this, and you're to take it back to Tim, who's holding up his hand in the very back. You're very welcome. Congratulations. Chance to introduce Darlene Hudson. We've been hearing a lot today during the panel discussion. You've been hearing Craig and others talk about it. And she is a co-founder, along with Craig, of the Southern Unity Movement. And they are going to, she's going to offer words, but she's also going to talk more about the brunch that we've been hearing about. So, where are you? Come. Do you go by Rochelle or Carly? Okay. Right, okay.
Thank you. Wow, was that not amazing? Well, now, wait a minute.
Come on now.
Come on.
Wake them up.
Was that not amazing? Anyway, I am so grateful that Tim gave me a call about, being a part of this and talking about the Southern Unity Movement, the sponsors of the breakfast. This is Maurice. I get it right order. Maurice Robinson Cook, who is now also the co-chair for the Southern Unity Movement, as well as the breakfast. I just want to share with you just a little bit about the Southern Unity Movement. The mission of our organization is just to build a more unified Black LGBTQ community through advocacy and cultural education that focus on multi-gender, intergenerational participation. We believe that the Southern Unity Movement believes that the breakfast is more than a single event. It is a commitment that we make all year long. Our team will continue to work and create positive, inclusive events, thought-provoking programs, and long-lasting partnerships that celebrate our collective accomplishments, diversity, and resilience. Our vision is to see people much like, especially Rustin, Bayard Rustin, celebrate all through the South. That is the vision of the Southern Unity Movement. And as soon as we can identify, that's what we're going to be doing as a part of our long-term planning, is to see our people celebrated throughout the South. We want Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, South Carolina, There's already some going on in North Carolina. I love it. Just throughout the South, we want to make sure that our people are celebrated through history. And I'm going to let Maurice talk a little bit more, just a little bit about the breakfast. That actually, as you guys know, Craig and I started years ago. And Tom Michelle, I like how you use that word, our elders. I said, did she just call us the elders? But I'm 62, so I guess I'm really am qualified now. So, I'm in it. I'm all in it until I wake up in the morning and can't hardly move. But amen. That's all right. I'm moving. I got up this morning and did gardening.
Amen.
Pluck weeds. Clean my garage. Made some notes. Rushed up here. Awesome country. So I'm doing good. I thank God for who I am and what He's done in my life. I just have to say that. And raise your hand if you've ever been to the breakfast. Just raise your hand. Isn't that, look at that.
Yes.
Would y'all look at that? Right. I want y'all to welcome Maurice to the mic.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'll make this short. All the things I always say, never give a minister the mic, because I will cut up and go in on a sermon in a heartbeat. So I'm thankful for the breakfast. I'm thankful to talk about the breakfast. The breakfast has saved my life over the years. I've been working with the breakfast for the 23 years we've been doing the breakfast. I've been at the breakfast those 23 years. It's been a great experience. It's a growing experience. I'm growing every year we do this. So I want you who have not been here, make sure you come see us next year. Make sure you go to our website, southernunity.org. You can learn more about the breakfast. One of the things I want to say about the breakfast, along with Bayard, Rustin as well, is that there are 3 things that I learned out of that. And the things that I can say now, and I'm so happy to be in the space to be able to say that. 1, God, gay, husband. Look at God. Look at God, gay and husband. See, I'm a minister. I love God. And I love that man right there.
Amen.
And together we're growing because of what Bayard Rustin taught us. Amen?
Amen.
It's a good thing. It's a great thing to celebrate. And so we are moving. Things are different. It's not like it used to be. And I'm part of a Farming Church. If you ever get a chance, for Hope Fellowship of Atlanta, you can visit us online too, makeroomforme.com. God is with you. God is for you, and God will always be with you and will grant you the desires of your heart. If I can get it, you can get it. So thank you all.
Graphics that you see outside, from our program souvenir booklet, right down to the stickers that we brought for everyone today. Please pick up one. This is the guy who designs everything for us. This guy gives us that image, a very powerful image. I believe next is going to be Cannon. Oh, no, it's Cannon. Y'all know Cannon? Y'all need to put your hands together. This is a fighting, sister, doing her thing up there at the Capitol, and she's going to tell you more about yet another opportunity to look at the work of Bayard.
Thank you so much. So I'm Park Cannon. I serve as a state representative. I am the youngest woman in the General Assembly, openly queer, and excited to be here with my team, Aubrey and John. Thank you for all that you do. In this work at the Capitol, I see so many familiar faces. So again, I'm coming because it is a call to the Capitol. It is time for us to descend again. And so tomorrow, today is his birthday, but tomorrow we are having his day at the Capitol. We will actually be hosting you so that we can push forward into the next day, which is to ask for a stamp. We want him forever. And so there's currently a campaign that the National Black Justice Coalition has, which is to get Mr. Rustin a stamp. If you have an iPhone, I can airdrop you the link, and you can do this on your own. It requires for us to do something that we have not done maybe in a while, which is to actually mail it physically to the postmaster. So you will print this piece of paper out, you will sign it, You will put it in an envelope, put a stamp on it, and mail it. And so if you are interested in that, you can come tomorrow and complete that at the Capitol with us. We'll also be doing some videos as call to action to be posting, so come camera ready for that. The only last thing I wanted to do was just share my connection to Mr. Rustin. I graduated from UNC Chapel Hill, where he, of course, faced his arrest, and as many of you were with me 2 years ago, almost to the day, 3 years ago, almost to the day, I was arrested at the Georgia State Capitol. And so I just want to thank y'all for being with me, for reminding me that it is okay for me to fight for voting rights in a queer way. We are not stopping. In fact, we are going to keep knocking. And I invite you to just sing one quick black happy birthday. We know, right? We know the version of that, yes? I'm going to let Tony and Shelly. You got it. Happy birthday. I'm ready. Happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. Yes. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. Say what? Happy birthday.
Thank you, Colleen, Maurice, and Representative. Thank you so much. We are at a place now where I get to introduce Tim West. And because of time, I'm just going to invite you to go to the website and read line for line, comma for comma, every period. Because you need to understand who this brother is and what he has done. And with his work with the Institute, he's not just doing it here. This is national work. He didn't just get to this work. Tim has been on the battlefront for decades. And as Paul Robeson reminded us, the battlefront is everywhere. And there is no sheltered rear. Tim West understands there's never, ever, ever been a sheltered rear. And so I want to tell you just real quick, I believe in divine order, and I'm going to tell you exactly what happened. I did not know Tim. We'd never met. I am doing the Black History program for Atlanta Company, and he was in the studio as well. And we started talking, and he said, Judge, would you do this? Of course, yes, yes, yes. And so the fact that I am a straight Black woman does not mean that I do not care about what happens. Because I can't be concerned about human rights, civil rights, if I'm not concerned about everybody. And if you know me for any amount of time, I am not new to the party. And I believe in this work. And I will always stand shoulder to shoulder with you. And so Tim has written this wonderful book that he gifted me that morning. It's called Red Dirt Blue Light, a poetic memoir in 6 reps. And there is a piece in that book that is so transparent and so emotional, where it's called Negation. And he talks about a father having had a seed. And I'm not going to give away all of it, you can go read it. But if this Black father had known the son would be gay, that he might have tried to crush the seed to the earth. I had to catch my breath. But this is a collection of poetic, absolute artistry that you need to read. And so read his bio, because we are getting ready now to move forward. He is going to sit down and do a fireside chat with Walter.
And I'm so grateful that Walter is here with us. And with that, Tim, it's time to do. Oh, one more raffle ticket. Woo! Yes. And if you didn't bribe me to pick your ticket, I'm not picking your ticket. All right, here we go. All right, you ready? Yes. 3713. 3713.
That's you?
All right, so you will see them in the back. Here, let me see. Okay, since it's curled, let money match my curl. Congratulations.
Can we give it up for Judge Hatchett to be so serious? Really host and ally, and I want to say something to people in this space. Craig Washington and I were talking about allyship, and I think it was a few months ago when I saw on Twitter this quote that says, if you claim to be an ally and you're not being hit by the stones thrown at the person you claim to be an ally for, then you're not standing close enough. Right? And when I saw that, it was a major call in, right? Because we like to be the allies that, like, when the person gets hit by the stone, we go and give them a Band-Aid or comfort them after. And so that bar of, like, I'm willing to actually take the hit for the person raises the bar of our allyship and the people that don't come with the privileges that we do. So with that said, thank you, Judge Hatchett. It is just a real honor and privilege to be able to sit next to Walter Nagel, who was Bayard's life partner from 77, I think, to 87, and who I met when I was a graduate student in New York many, many, many moons ago. And so I just want to start by asking, something that I've always been curious about. How'd you meet Mr. Rustin?
Thank you, Tim. Well, before I answer the question, I want to thank the Center for Civil and Human Rights for inviting me to join you today. And I want to build a little bit on what Judge Hatchett said about human rights. Because if you've seen the film, you know it's mostly about the March on Washington, which of course is associated with the African American Civil Rights Movement. But Bayard was 51 years old when he organized that march. And he did not just spring up spontaneously and do that work. He had been working for 30 years before that, 20, 25, 30 years before that, on all kinds of issues, not just African American civil rights issues. He was out there protecting and meeting with Japanese Americans who were interned out in California during World War II in detention camps. He went to India in 1949 and met with Gandhi's followers to learn really more about the mechanics of organizing mass demonstrations. And in the early 50s, he was over in Ghana, what is now Ghana, it was then the Gold Coast, and Nigeria, meeting with Kwame Nkrumah and Nnamdi Azikiwe about African liberation struggles. So Bayard was somebody that was really concerned about liberation for all people, and it was really always about human rights. So to answer your question, I met Bayard actually in 1977. We were just on the same corner waiting for a light to change. Bayard, I looked around and there was this tall, dark, handsome man. And he looked at me and he said, "Hello, I am Bayard Rustin." And I said, "I'm toast." Now I had known who Bayard was because the summer of 1963, when they were organizing the March on Washington, I was in 8th grade. I was a pretty serious kid. I was kind of a religious kid. I was interested in the movement. I was interested in nonviolence. And Bayard's name started appearing in the papers, especially after Strom Thurmond went after him on the Senate floor. And over the years, I was involved in the anti-war movement, the anti-Vietnam War movement, and Bayard's name was showing up there. And I was like, gee, who is this guy? He's all over the place. But it was always about standing up for everybody and standing up against injustice and doing it nonviolently. So when I met him, I knew the history and I knew who he was. I was just very lucky to be in the right place at the right time.
It's really interesting. We were talking earlier about when I came to awareness of who Bayard Rustin was, and it was graduate school. And I just remember the great sense of betrayal that I felt that I would get to that point in my life in graduate school and not had heard about who Bayard Rustin was. But I also reflected on my 15-year-old self. I often say that the reason that I do this work is because I was a 16-year-old kid in Southwest Arkansas that tried to take my life because I felt very much like a unicorn. And I imagined the power had I known who James Baldwin was. I knew who James Baldwin was, actually. I did not know he was family, right? I did not know who Bayard Rustin was. And so I think at this time and moment where there are these divisive concept deals and we're trying to rob our students of the real truth of our history, that knowing who you are and where you come from can be very life-saving. And it's so important for us to fight for. I want you to tell us a little bit about the film, right? Obviously, Rustin, as the Netflix film, has brought Bayard Rustin's legacy to I guess, a heightened sense of notoriety. But I think it goes back further than maybe a lot of people realize.
Well, actually it does, and there was an article in the New York Times last week, I guess it was, about the making of biopics, because there were so many of them this year. You had the movie about Leonard Bernstein, you had Oppenheimer, you had Rustin, and the reporter was talking to me about, well, how did this actually start? And a couple of people came to me in 2010, so we're talking 13 years ago, and sat me down and said, we want to do a picture about Bayard Rustin. And they talked to me, and I said to them, you know, we have a great documentary, Brother Outside of the Life of Bayard Rustin, which is actually up on Netflix now, along with Rustin. And I said, you know, what do I need you guys for? You know, you're Hollywood. We have a factual history, a document here. And they convinced me by saying, well, you know, the documentary is great, but how many people have seen it? And there have been a lot of people who have seen it over the years. It's still out there. But when they said, you know, when Hollywood does something and it drops on November 17th to 2023, and it's in 174 countries around the world, that is just an immediate, tremendous lift in terms of Bayard's profile and people learning who he was. So that kind of convinced me. But again, this was 2010. It took 13 years, a couple of studios, one director, I think George C. Wolfe was pretty much with the project from the very beginning, but a couple of producers, and it wound up in higher ground with President and Mrs. Obama's company. So it took a long time, and I like to think of it as a coalition. Bayard was always big on coalitions, because when you have a coalition, you have a whole group of different people. They may be working for the same end goal, but they don't agree on necessarily everything. But if you really want to get to that end goal, you have to kind of set aside your differences, what you want to accomplish. And I can tell you, those of us who worked on the film, and my role was minor, I say it was minor, but there were other people. We didn't always agree on everything, but in the end, we were happy with the result because I felt that it really portrayed the person that I loved and the person that I care about. A person of courage, dignity, integrity, great moral sense, and also a good sense of humor. So we were happy with it in the end.
That's awesome. I think it's really important to reflect on that journey to getting to a place where we can celebrate Bayard Rustin's life now. I want to go to something you said that makes me think about, I think about the genius of Rustin's legacy being this notion of collective action, right? And at a time, well, you know, I'll say it. The right has figured out that they don't need to agree with every single issue on the right to get behind a certain candidate. I'll leave it at that. On the left, there's a lot of single issue politics. If you don't agree with, I can agree with you on 90% of the stuff, but that one thing that you don't agree with me on, I'm going to throw you out. And as I think Judge Hatchett said earlier, we cannot afford, with democracy on the line, to have that kind of focus. And I think what Bayard Rustin understood is that
when you watch the film, I think about the moments where Rustin wanted something, right? Was the main thing. He wanted to be able to have this be a 2-day event, right? And they came back and said, no, it has to be 1 day. Imagine if Bayard Rustin said, well, no, I'm not going to do that. We can't do it at all, right? So there's a sense of humility, right? When you lead in that way, that everything may not go exactly the way I envisioned, but we still need to align on something that moves us forward. Can you say a little bit about that in terms of how Bayard would talk about this moment that we're in right now in 2024, where the politics in the Middle East and Israel and Gaza and the Palestinian people and so many other issues become these wedge issues for people that would otherwise collectively move towards justice?
Yeah, I certainly agree with everything that you said, and I think, he would be emphasizing the fact that, this is a very important year, this is a very important election year. Our democracy is on the line, chopping block perhaps. And it's true that there are people who disagree on particular issues, especially what's going on in the Middle East, also on, of course, LGBT rights, all kinds of issues, women's reproductive health. But we need to face the fact that if we don't coalesce in some way and keep a Democrat, whoever that Democrat may be, whether we like him or not, in the White House, the gains that we have made, and we have made gains over the last 60, 70 years, let's be honest about it, it's not enough, of course, but we made them. But we don't want to have them rolled back any more than they're already being rolled back, and people are trying to roll them back even further. So we really need to set aside some of our differences and focus, keep our eyes on the prize, if you will, about holding on to our democracy.
I think that's important, having a conversation with a nephew who's very much like, oh, I don't believe in this democracy XYZ. And I simply said, you don't have to like Biden. Vote for the Supreme Court. And that made sense to him. I said, you don't have to like Biden? I said, but look at who's on that Supreme Court and look at the decisions they've made over the past few years that have impacted everything. And so I think one of the things about Rustin was his genius to be strategic, in terms of his thinking. I'm going to ask one last question because we want to let you have time to use those green armbands and actually visit the museum. Make sure that you visit the March on Washington space where you will see Bayard Rustin prominently displayed there. But as someone who's a hip hop artist and a poet as well, some people know that about me, some people don't. I think about in cultivating the next generation of advocates how we have to think outside of our respectable traditional norms around advocacy. And curious what you think about the role of the arts in this sort of new wave of activism and advocacy. And importantly, you mentioned Bayard's sense of humor, right? I think Black joy is Black revolution. And that we have to fight as hard for our joy as anything else, and that we don't get very far if we don't sort of bring that joy to it. So can you speak a little bit about the art and who Bayard was as someone who was a creative and had a good sense of humor?
Yeah, I can address that. But first, I want to say a little bit about your nephew. I don't know how old he is, but I can tell you when I was 19, 20 years old, this was just around the time they were changing the voting age. I was down on voting. I was down on a lot of things, and I was not about to vote. But I can tell you, after 4 years, 5, 6 years of Richard Nixon and Gerald Ford, I was ready to vote. So I think I stopped playing with that I'm not voting thing. Now music, Bayard was what we like to refer to as a cliche, a Renaissance man. He was a very talented musician, had a wonderful tenor voice. There are recordings available of him singing, and some of them are the soundtrack for Brother Outsider. That's Bayard singing in the background. So he was very talented. Performed with Paul Robeson on Broadway in a very short-lived play in 1940 called John Henry. He was one of Josh White's Carolinians. But in terms of the movement, he saw music, very often the spirituals, but also labor songs, freedom songs, as a way of, again, bringing people together. Sometimes when you were out there on a picket line, or you were having a sit-in, you were on a demonstration, people would get demoralized because there might be a threat facing you. The police might be coming. People would start getting nervous. And if Bayard would stand up and start singing and hopefully getting people to join in with him, it was a way of lifting up your spirits, kind of renewing your energy, even sometimes taking a deep breath to figure out what maybe you're going to do next, if you were up against it. So it was, it went beyond just the art side. It was also the human side about bringing people together and joining together. As far as younger people are concerned today, the thing I think about Bayard, he never gave up. He took a lot of hits. Sorry. As I like to say, no interview with me would be complete without a few tears. But anyway, he took a lot of hits, and some of you knew see in the Rustin film. They were still coming after him about being gay, about being a member of the Young Communist League, about being a pacifist during World War II, which was a very popular war, as wars go. But he never gave up. He always got back up and went back into the fight. And I think, if young people are feeling demoralized about what's going on, we need to help. We need to help them revive that spirit and get back in there, get back in the ring, and try and make change. Doesn't mean you're going to win every victory every time, but you are going to make gains, and it's important to keep pushing things forward. So I would say, don't give up.
I certainly appreciate that. And as I look in this room, one of the things that's really inspiring for me is that cross-generational sharing, that there are people here across multiple generations. I've even seen some very young ones in the back. And I think that's important. I think going through the museum, one of the things to look for is I think there's a 19-year-old picture representing John Lewis. Right? And you think about, these were babies out there figuring it out. And I think it's incumbent on the National Center for Civil and Human Rights, and through my work at the LGBTQ+ Institute, to create a reservoir where we support and listen to and put in front and center our young people so that they can lead this next wave of the movement. I'm going to close with, in a true sort of creative fashion, I wrote a poem. It took me about 3 days over 4 states. And I want to share this just sort of as a tribute to Bayard. I wrote some of it today, inspired by the stuff that was happening on stage. And this is called Angelic. And what I will try to do, if you go to LGBTQinstitute.org, you will see the event page for this. I believe that through Gay Magazine, we'll be able to, at some point, put the footage from this on that site so that you can share this with other people who weren't here today. I'll also include this poem, and this is called Angelic. This is for the angelic troublemakers, channeling righteous rage because our Lord was right when she said, your silence will not protect you. For those of us denied seats at the table are told to just shut up and eat and never complain. Those of us denied mirrors and windows to see ourselves more clearly, told that our affirmation is a divisive concept and not a salad. This is for Bayard, James, Audrey, Essex, Marcia, and Stormy, who fought and died so we could thrive. Even when Black history tries to hush their fire, mute their melody. Remember, you too are angelic when your blues color you heavy, when this world ain't feeling your black, and they suggest your queerness somehow erases your race. Run on like a bad, non-grammatical country colloquial sentence. Run like your ancestors ran for North, like Carl ran for Meadows. R. Ailey for Revelations, Lorraine Hansberry for A Raisin in the Sun, Marcia for A Stonewall Brick. Run like Bayard after being betrayed by kings. Run chest stuck out and proud when you ain't picked as Big Six, knowing you were the one, when your own don't want to own you, but can't possibly know who they are except to see their fear through the tears of your courage. But also run to each other. Run anywhere joy elicits your dance. Run to kiss and smile and lovers like Bayard's love, both taboo and taboo. Cross picket lines and color lines. Run from haters or to haters, but surely and always into the arms of lovers, chosen and found fam. For is there any sweeter justice than to have lived a life so loved? When you can stare into the eyes of your beloved, when your rights ain't treated right, when legislation say your matters don't matter, run to show up for a hug and kiss, knowing your joy, no less than your fight, is angelic, perfectly imperfect, like Brother Bayard. So keep that in mind. It's really our love, and if we lose sight of our love and our joy and our passion amid the work, then we don't win the fight. And so with that, I want to welcome you. Make sure your green bands are on. Meet somebody you haven't met today. Again, LGBTQinstitute.org is where you can find out about the work that we continue to do here at the National Center for Civil Human Rights. And please enjoy your afternoon. Thank you for coming.